Sort of piggybacking off your most recent answers, in your opinions for each of your organizations and your agencies, how difficult is it now versus 15, 20 years ago, especially with policymakers at the national level, to get the attention and support that you need to fulfill your goals and obligations, your visions for 20, 30 years out from now? Is it easier just to go the philanthropic route, or do you actually still engage at the federal level with U.S. congressmen, U.S. senators, other national leaders across the globe?
Well, I can jump in first, I guess. So for us, it's actually gotten easier over the last decade or so, but we've never had any public support in the form of USAID or other government support for water.org. We've really relied on raising the philanthropic capital, and what's happened is that because of the model and the leverage with water credit, $20 million invested so far in philanthropy has yielded $770 million in loans. We find that we really resonate well with the corporate world and corporate foundations, like Stella Artois. That seemed to be a big thing for them, that we get this leverage. The Caterpillar Foundation, the IKEA Foundation, and PepsiCo, even though I don't know if I can say that here in Atlanta, the area, or not, have been really big supporters of this. And so we've actually seen that our funding continue to rise because we do work with a market-based system, and I think it's going to continue. I mean, with the whole tax code change and repatriation of capital and these corporations being flush, I also have great hope that we'll get a lot more investment from the corporate world into the water equity funds. It's already starting to happen as they get more flush with cash. So for us, it's actually been a good time to be doing what we're doing, given the model that we have.
So as I mentioned earlier, we don't have really a choice but to engage with the federal government. The federal government is our source of funding. We get a congressional appropriation. And so that's a big piece of the work that we do. And I think that at the same time, we do work fairly extensively with educational and academic institutions like Kennesaw and have extensive partnerships and grant-making support to institutions that undertake research and work on the ground in the conflict zones where we work and on the topics where we're engaged. So we have an extensive network of partners, but the vast majority of our budget is a congressional appropriation. I think then the answer to your question in terms of where we stand, there's kind of two sides to that. So we, in this administration's first budget, the U.S. Institute of Peace was one of the small departments and agencies that was slated for elimination. So that was last fiscal year. And in the president's budget for his second year in office, we're no longer slated for elimination. I think that's in response to greater clarity with regard to what we do in our role, but our budget is heavily cut. That's obviously a very unsettling place for the U.S. Institute for Peace to find itself. At the same time, there has been a substantial support within Congress, which is heartening both with regard to the work we're doing, but also heartening more broadly for the concept and the support for looking at conflict resolution and peace building and defense development and diplomacy as all fundamental legs of the stool of U.S. foreign policy writ large. And as somebody who worked in USAID in the 1990s and then again in the 2000s, I think that's been a substantial change in the way Washington, D.C. looks at the conduct of foreign policy and the tools of foreign policy. I don't know that there always was as much broad-based support for all of those areas of action. So we at USIP are obviously nervous because our appropriation isn't guaranteed. And this is the second year in a row where we're facing a fairly steep climb in terms of the conversation, but we're also heartened by the support we see and that the narrative has shifted to be a broader narrative about how to approach the conduct of U.S. foreign policy and how to approach conflict resolution and peace building more generally.